You're up first.
Yeah. Yes. Up here is better.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I know it's been a really long time since I spoke with everyone. I am going to quickly provide an overview of the Canadian annual report, and I'm going to go grab my mouse so I can scroll my screen. Just give me 2 seconds. Okay, so I will be presenting the commercial and recreational portions of Canada's national report. My colleague Trevor Ryall, who is the Groundfish Enforcement Coordinator, will be speaking to the enforcement report, which is Appendix 3. And then this will be followed by Mike Turner and Kevin Romanen of the BC provincial government to present the final appendix. So following agreement at last year's annual meeting, the Canadian portion of the coastal TCEY for 2022 was 7.11 million net pounds. After accounting for other removals, including FSC, non-directed bycatch, and directed commercial and recreational discard mortality, the resulting Canadian FCEY was 6.71 or approximately 6.71 million net pounds. The Canadian FCEY, or Directed Commercial and Recreational Access, is divided and allocated between the directed sectors at 85% commercial and 15% recreational. So I'll first discuss the commercial fishery, and then I will move on to the recreational fishery. So for the directed commercial fishery, with 85% of the Canadian FCEY, after accounting for domestic research amounts, which we call use of fish, a 2022 commercial TAC of 5,633,250 net pounds was established. However, the commercial fishery has both underage and overage policies in place, so there was a net carryover of quota from the 2021 season into the 2022 season of approximately 125,000 net pounds. This resulted in a commercial total available quota for 2022 of approximately 5.76 million net pounds. So to follow that available quota of 5.76 million net pounds, the 2022 commercial catch was 5,435,482 net pounds, and this is effective as of yesterday morning. So approximately that turns out to be about 94% exploitation rate of the 2022 available quota. And a reminder that this catch includes both landed catch and mortality associated with all legal size release fish in commercial groundfish hook and line fisheries here in BC. We'd also like to highlight and remind everyone that management measures for all groundfish commercial fisheries in BC include 100% at-sea electronic monitoring and 100% dockside monitoring of landed catch. All groundfish fisheries also have individual transferable quotas by species and groundfish management areas. So a couple of notable factors affecting the Canadian commercial halibut fishery in 2022 included the ongoing rebuilding measures for yellow eye rockfish and picachio rockfish in all commercial groundfish fisheries, and the year-round bottom trawl closure in the area known as Circle Toe or 800 line is south of Haida Gwaii. That was implemented in March 2019, continues to be in effect. For this past year, there was a rollover of the winter expansion to that closure that was first implemented in 2022, and it runs from November 1st to the end of April. While the closure, year-round closure will remain in place, the expanded seasonal closure is an interim management measure that's intended to limit harvest of spotting aggregations of both arrowtooth flounder and halibut, and is intended for the short term until it's reevaluated during the upcoming season in light of new arrowtooth stock assessment. This took place in November 2022. So details of the outcome of these pending discussions will be presented at the next annual meeting if they're relevant. So before I move on to the recreational sector report, I will mention that the experimental recreational halibut fishery, also known as XRQ, this opened on April 1st and closed on December 31st, 2022. A carryover of uncaught quota from the previous season amounted to 8,100 net pounds of quota being carried forward. Approximately 219 licenses were issued in 2022, and this is a decrease from 238 in 2021, We're still in the process of analyzing returned logbooks. Harvesters have until the end of this month to have them returned. But as of January 23rd, there was 11,243 net pounds of quota reallocated from the commercial sector into XRQ and 9,392 net pounds of catch. So we're expecting that number to increase slightly as we finish processing the logbooks, but it shouldn't be much higher than that. So with that, I'll move on to the recreational report. So with 15% of the Canadian FCEY, a 2022 recreational TAC of 1,011,750 net pounds was established. The 2022 management measures were, as in past years, the recreational license season runs from April 1st to March 31st. So when we opened the 2022 recreational halibut season on February 15th, it was with a rollover of the 2021 management measures in place until we reached that April 1st date. And that was with the option to retain either one large fish, max 126 centimeters, or two smaller fish with a maximum of 90 centimeters with an annual limit of 6 halibut. On April 1st, the 2022 license season began, and we updated the management measures to the option to retain one larger fish, a maximum of 133 centimeters, or two smaller fish, a maximum of 90 centimeters, with an annual limit of 10 halibut. The 2022 management option was developed in cooperation with and on the expert advice of the Sportfish Advisory Board and the Recreational Halibut Committee, and is reflective of a robust preseason forecasting process. So to accompany that TAC of just over 1 million net pounds, a 2022 recreational catch of 929,193 net pounds was observed. So this was approximately 92% of the exploitation rate. And that catch estimate is valid until just the end of November. The December catch data isn't going to be available until next week, but we did forecast out from what took place in December last year. December catch is normally very low, and in the past 12 years has not exceeded 6,000 net pounds cumulatively. So a range and detailed catch tables are available in the report that's on the website if you're interested. There are also some more detailed estimates of catch by areas and by month, and the report also outlines available biological catch information. So just a couple of notable pieces from the 2022 fishery. The 2022 recreational fishery opened on February 15th and remained open until December 31st. So as part of the standard in-season management process, catch estimates to the end of July, combined with catch forecasting for August and onwards, predicted a significant underage of the recreational TAC, which we have seen played out. Given this forecasted underage in mid-August, as I was mentioning in the annual meeting this morning, the department, in collaboration with the SFAB, raised the recreational daily limit to a maximum of 3 fish per day, and this was only for fish under 90 centimeters. And this was in an attempt to provide a reasonable additional opportunity for recreational anglers to maximize their domestic TAC. So as previously mentioned, this flexibility in the regulations allows for a maximum of 3 fish per day. This was requested and approved at the IPHC special session meetings in 2021 and 2022 on an annual basis. And as previously introduced, Canada has submitted a regulatory amendment request to allow this flexibility to continue. However, so despite this change and the increase of the bag limit to 3 per day, the fishery was still unable to exploit their full domestic allocation, leaving approximately 82,557 pounds in the water. So how do we get these catch estimates in Canada? Traditional catch monitoring and reporting programs, including extensive creel surveys and logbook programs, are used to generate recreational catch estimates in peak months. DFO's internet-based recreational survey, also known as IREC, collects information from recreational license holders on a monthly basis and is also primarily used to estimate catch in non-peak months where traditional catch monitoring programs may not be available. So there are so many more details about these programs and how they work in the report as well. So just before I wrap up, just wanted to remind folks that recreational halibut is managed proactively in season. The department meets with SFAB representatives monthly to review updated catch estimates, and to determine the appropriate in-season management actions. The Canadian recreational fishery also has a domestic overage policy in place, which has not been triggered since it has been implemented. But if there was any overage occurred in a season, it would be deducted domestically from the next year's TAC. So with that, I am done with the commercial and recreational reviews. I'm not sure if we wanted to pause for questions here, if we wanted to get through the entire report first.
Let's deal with any questions that any on this part of the report.
Okay.
Richard?
Yeah, just a clarification question. So in the recreational fishery where there's an overage or underage or rollover to next year, does that come out of the commercial fishery? I mean,
No. So with the recreational fishery, there's only an overage. There isn't an underage provision as well. And it would come out of the domestic recreational, so that out of that 15% the next season.
so the next season is deducted from their.
Yeah.
Okay, if it's deducted next season, who gets the benefit of that? I mean, is there more allocation for the commercial fishery in that?
No,
So,
no, it hasn't been implemented since I've been in the role. So I'm a bit fuzzy on the details, but my understanding is no, that overage wouldn't be reallocated to another sector.
okay, thank you. And the other question is, I noticed, your opening statement, the amount of Canadian TAC you have, 7.110. So is there a conversion between what you get here, the TCUIs distributed to Canada, and what this TAC is? Because I think last year was 7.4 or something,
So you're looking at the conversion from last year. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Yeah,
where
well,
I'm
the
going.
TCUI for 2B last year was, I think, 7.4 some. And
Yeah.
then I just glanced over here and you see the TAC is 7.1. So is there
Yeah,
a
so-
conversion because of some?
There are removals that are taken out of that. So FSC, so food social ceremonial purposes, research purposes, and I had it written down. Just give me 2 seconds. And non-directed bycatch as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Thank
that's
you.
all deducted from the TCY before we split it out.
Thank you very much for the clarification. Thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Gwen? Peter?
You mentioned 800 circle foot closure, and you had said it's dependent on the narrow tooth assessment, but it also is giving consideration of how.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So it was put in place a couple of years ago, and it was originally anticipated to be reviewed when the arrowtooth stock assessment came out. That was delayed for about 1.5 to 2 years. So we kept rolling over that expanded closure in anticipation of getting that advice. That process took place at the end of November, and the pre-publication should be coming out for it soon. But I've been very adamant that consideration needs to be given to the spawning aggregation of halibut as well. The intention of the closure is to protect that spawning allocation or aggregation. It's not just for arrowtooth flounder. There is a working group established with both myself, my colleague Deirdre Finn, who is the trawl coordinator, members of the Halibut Advisory Board and the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee. And that working group will be probably getting together in the relatively near future to start those discussions again of what to do going forward. Welcome.
Any other questions? Nope. All right. Thanks, Gwen. Trevor.
Thanks so much.
So good afternoon, everyone, commissioners. My name is Trevor Ryall. I'm a fishery officer, groundfish enforcement coordinator for 2B. And I'm going to give my enforcement report. So Canada's enforcement priorities for halibut this year were closed area fishing, conservation, marine protected areas, rockfish conservation areas, interim sanctuary zones and other permitted in-season fishing closures. We also focused on the retention of groundfish that was caught and possessed without the authority of the license. We also focused on unauthorized commercial FSC dual fishing. And finally, the vessel masters failing to provide assistance to dockside validators. There was no at-sea observers this year, so we didn't pay much attention to information with regards to at-sea observers. So in order to accomplish our enforcement priorities, we conducted aerial surveillances with our new Dash 8 airplane. We replaced our Dash 8, we replaced our King Air with a Dash 8. A lot of our patrolling was done at between 3,000 and 5,000 feet. And I don't know if this is appropriate, but I do have a photograph of a photo of a vessel at 4,869 feet. So you can see the quality of the photograph. This is a long line vessel setting gear. So we conducted 128 missions last year with 228 hours of dedicated halibut enforcement. During those patrols, we encountered 168 halibut vessels. And some of the common violations were closed area fishing and conditions of license violations for no seabird avoidance gear, and we also focused on hail in and hail out requirements, which is a requirement that all vessel masters need to do, so that when we see a boat, we know that they're supposed to be out there. We also have a marine patrol unit. We normally have 2 dedicated CMP platforms that operate on a 2-week on, 2-week off basis. Last year, we only had 1 vessel operating, and it was due to lack of Coast Guard resources, in particular engineers. They're short of engineers. We did dedicate 2 2-week patrols on groundfish enforcement and focused on licensing documents, logbook entries, and halibuts and size limits, species size limits. We also have program vessels that are more inshore that we utilize to enforce the BC sports fishing regs for just local areas within the detachments where the bigger, larger ships can't go. And then we also use vehicles to attend halibut offloads and do some checks at marinas, etc. So of the last year, there was 149 vessels that participated in the commercial fishery with 604 landings. Some of the common occurrences or violations were fishing in a closed area, failing to comply with the condition of the license. One of them was releasing rockfish and not deploying seabird avoidance gear. Last year, there was 333,000 recreational licenses issued. And some of the common occurrences or violations were possessing halibut where the skin has been removed, possessing halibut where you can't measure the size, and basically filleting the halibut so you couldn't determine how many halibut were when the person was in possession. There's also violations on failing to record their halibut on their license and exceeding limits of halibut. And last year there was 218 XRQ licenses issued. And there was a lot of administrative violations, failing to comply with the condition of a license, like returning their logbooks and returning their license at the end of the season. I think that's all I have. You guys have the detailed report in front of you. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thanks very much, Trevor, for the summary of the enforcement report. Any questions for Trevor?
Sure.
Trevor, you mentioned the no at sea program.
Okay, good question. Yeah, so because of COVID, we implemented, we've replaced the at-sea observers with cameras. The halibut fleet has a minimum of 2 cameras, and they're required to have EM system at all times. The other fisheries, trawl in particular, we've replaced the at-sea observers with lots of cameras. They have 3 cameras recording 24/7 on the decks. And then if it's a factory trawler or an RTV, a receiving tank vessel, they've got additional cameras below deck to capture receiving areas, sorting areas, processing areas, 24/7 as well.
Question. So who processes all this data? Must be a lot of data coming in. I mean, is enforcement responsible for looking at all this data, or what's the process?
Thanks, Commissioner. That's a good question. Canada hires a third-party provider, service provider, and they review 10% of the data. So for halibut, it's 10% of each string that's set is reviewed and compared to their logbook, and then they come up with an audit, and there's an audit score. And if they meet the audit and pass the audit, then they're good. But if they don't, then there's further consequences. If they either have to take, like if they actually fail an audit, they're subject to maybe 100% review, or they could possibly take an at-sea observer out, which would be an expense to the skipper.
Follow up then. Do you have any idea of these violations or amount of discrepancies you find in a season?
The failed audits, man, that's a good question. Gwen would know more because she particularly deals with them more, but I haven't had to deal with any on an enforcement scenario for a failed audit.
Thank you.
Yeah, John.
Thanks. Just a follow-up, Trevor. So you said, I believe 10% of the video is reviewed initially.
Yeah.
Is that true across the different sectors that you mentioned, the different types of vessels and so forth?
It is, except the only difference is trawl receiving tank vessels, the big factory ships. They're 25% review. So 25% of their tows are reviewed.
Okay.
Compared to their logbook.
Yeah.
entries.
And I take it the vessels don't know what portion you're going to be
No,
reviewing,
it's totally
so-
random.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Trevor? No. Thanks very much, Trevor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Turner.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Turner. I'm the policy director with the province of BC in the Fisheries, Aquaculture, and Wild Salmon branch of the Ministry of Waterland and Resource Stewardship. And happy to present the province's agency report this afternoon. Last night, hopefully, you all heard from my minister, Nathan Cullen, giving the remarks at the reception. And really, giving that message around how the province wants to be more engaged and more involved in fisheries matters in this province and in the Pacific region. So part of his role, excuse me, and the role of the ministry, which is new, was to bring sort of a consolidation of fisheries, aquaculture, wild salmon matters within the provincial government all into one place, and that's what that part of the role of the new ministry is. Some of you may remember myself and others from the province presenting before from the perspective of the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, but now that's been brought into this new ministry that's accountable not just for the province's economic interests in fisheries, but also the stewardship, integrated land and natural resource management, cumulative effects, working with Indigenous peoples on natural resource management, and that kind of overall environmental sustainability and interest the province has in fisheries, and that extends into the terrestrial area too, where much of the provincial jurisdiction lies in terms of management of the land and water. So while we in the province don't manage the fisheries themselves and have the management decisions, that lies with Canada, we do have that interest and jurisdiction, interest in the fisheries and how they're prosecuted, but also as soon as that fish is landed, then it does become kind of part of the purview of the province and enters the commercial chain, and there's food safety responsibilities and those types of interests. But we do work very closely with DFO and the Government of Canada to make sure those interests of British Columbians are expressed in the decision-making processes of the advice that eventually go to the federal minister for the decisions. So this is our 5th year providing the agency report and trying to, again, enhance that ability for the province to show how important the halibut fishery is for British Columbians and you know, part of Team Canada, and there's a Canada approach, but at the end of the day, the fishery in BC is done by British Columbians, so we really want to highlight that interest and the plan to continue to keep going with the role that we're trying to create here. The report this year contains 2 themes. So the first half is part of our responsibility in reporting out on fisheries economic statistics. So you'll see in the report that a couple of examples of the data. So the most recent data we have for the halibut fishery is 2021. We haven't finalized the 2022 fishery season data yet, but a wholesale value of 89.88 million to the province, almost 90 million Canadian dollars, contributing to over 65 processing facilities and 210 full-time processing jobs annually. Additionally, the recreational halibut fishery, I don't have annual numbers, but our most recent numbers there are mostly around how the halibut fishery drives and becoming a more increasingly important driver for the $1.1 billion in revenue that the recreational fishery across all species brings to the province, and 9,000 jobs. And those are 2016 numbers. We're right in the process of getting an updated contract to get those numbers more recent. I think in 2024 we should be able to bring newer numbers than 2016. The other half, again, continues our message around the need to recommit and use the commission to have a commitment to address improvements in monitoring and universal monitoring standards across all areas. That's a really important piece the province wants to push for, and sees the work done in other jurisdictions and stuff, and really wants to see that applied across all areas. And with that, increasing the methodology and accountability for mortality, both directed and non-directed, across the calculations of how allocation and apportionment works. So that's the summary of the report. Happy to take any questions or expand on any of those pieces. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Michael. Any questions for Michael? Nope. Okay.
All right,
again.
thank you.
John, so I guess we're now on to the U.S. National Report.
Yep.
Oh, now we're on. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Kurt Iverson. I'm fishery management specialist in the Alaska region. We don't have a detailed report for you. I just wanted to give a brief summary because there's a lot of information in that report. So this is going to go through it and what is there. And then we have a lot of subject matter experts in the audience here that could address specific questions if you have them about anything that is in that report. And to remind you, we have a section in there that is devoted to our Pacific Coast region. That's Area 2A. So there's information there on the tribal fisheries, the non-tribal fisheries, the recreational fisheries, and also the law enforcement activities that were specific to that region. Similarly, we have the report broken out for the Alaska region, commercial, recreational, and that includes both guided and unguided, I'm sorry. Those particular removals are accounted for, the management are accounted for there. As we talked about earlier today, our management of our charter fishery is complex. And again, we have people here that can go into those details of how those management measures worked out, management measures we considered earlier today. There is a section there on non-directed commercial removals. And I actually generated some of those statistics, and I can speak to those. There is a section there again on law enforcement, which is a combination of a number of agencies. There is our Office of Law Enforcement, that's NOAA. There is partnerships with the state agencies, the U.S. Coast Guard, and in some places the National Park Service all join in those efforts. There's a lot of statistics there on the numbers of boardings that they had, the types of infractions they encountered, those sorts of things. And those folks are here too if you have questions. There are also, there's a short section there on our subsistence fisheries, which are substantial in Alaska. Those particular figures come from the state of Alaska. Again, we partner with them to develop a survey of subsistence users, and those surveys go out every 2 years. So the subsistence figures that we would be using for our mortality projections this year are the same as last year, and they just carry forward in the gap year. And I think that pretty much covers what's in the report. And again, if you have any specific questions, anything you might have seen in there, we can take them.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Any questions for Kurt? Peter?
We saw from Dr. Jenwick's report that the unguided fishery had gone over its prescribed amount. I don't know what it is. They were over what was predicted by 25%. I didn't see that in the statistics, but that's accurate.
The catch statistics are accurate. There was a small mistake there in referring to those harvests as being above a limit. There is no limit for our unguided sport halibut fishing, and that was just a carryover error that we actually caught a couple of years ago, and this one didn't get caught. And so there is no limit, but for the purposes of projecting our total mortalities, the work that Ian uses, he early in the year just formed a projection based upon recent years' harvests that gets stuck into our catch tables in the fishery data overview. So what they're doing is comparing his projection with what actually occurred, not a limit, just what actually occurred. And yes, it was over the projection. And overall, though, Commissioner Grief, as I recall, and my fish and game colleagues over here could confirm it, effort and harvests in the unguided sector in both Southeast Alaska and South Central Alaska, where the vast majority of the harvests occur, was generally flat. It came out over the projection, the total harvest, but that particular harvest didn't vary that much from previous years. Now, I don't know how that ended up over, but it was a little bit over. Yeah. It was relatively flat, and relative. I wish, again, we could dig those figures out for you if you want to look at them more specifically, but yeah. Yeah.
Like, how do you use that information that how do you use that information going forward to just
You know, that's a good question for Ian, exactly where the break point is. As he is going into, for example, the interim meeting, my understanding is that he's just using a projection. And at some point, he's grabbing the actual figures and plugging those in. I think at this point, for developing, my understanding, and I think I just saw him leave. Sarah, yeah, Sarah, you could correct me if I'm wrong. But my understanding that it is here at this annual meeting, when we're looking at total mortalities, he is using the actual estimates that we have, not projections any longer. It's similar with what we do with, our commercial fisheries in October or November when we're looking at the interim meeting, total mortalities, those are projections. Non-directed removals are projections. When we get here to this meeting, we're looking at our best estimates of the actuals. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Kurt, can you just remind me of how the recreational estimates are undertaken for the non-guided?
For the unguided, I'd be happy to take a stab at that, but we have experts. Yeah, we have experts in the room. And I told them when I came in here, for most of my life, I've tried to sit next to the smart people in the room, and they always bail me out. So I'm gonna yeah, sure.
Maybe I'll ask you a question and you might turn to someone else too, but on the halibut bycatch management actions in progress, I missed what you said about that. Maybe you could just expand upon that a bit more.
Right. In progress, you may recall the halibut abundance-based management that we have implemented in the Bering Sea. This is specific for the Bering Sea non-pollock trawl fleet. Their target species are mainly flatfish and Atka mackerel. They're enormous fisheries. And they take the bulk of the non-directed halibut in the Bering Sea. And for many years, they have been subject to an upper limit in the amount of halibut that they can take. And that particular limit has been ratcheted down over time. They have, for quite a number of years, been well below that limit. And I think Ian was showing us a slide yesterday that indicated that it had been progressively going down. Nevertheless, that the issue is their limits were never tied to abundance. So there's a proportionality problem there. If halibut abundance is down, but you've got a steady limit, that can present a problem. So that's the basis for halibut abundance-based management, is to tie their limits with halibut abundance. So we worked through a long process, took a long time to work out all of the intricacies of do that, to exactly how we're going to do that. And we're now at the proposed rule stage, which is part of our federal system. We've written the rule, it's out as a proposal, we're taking public comments on it. The agency will review those comments, come out with a final rule or some determination one way or the other. And that will all happen here this year.
Okay, thanks very much, Kurt.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Kurt? Neil?
What is the proposed
Oh,
rule?
Commissioner Davis, it's off the top of my head. I can't tell you the formula and exactly how it works for the abundance-based management. I'd be happy to give it to you. And I'm sorry I don't have that at my fingertips, because it is important. And I know that all of the commissioners have been they've been following this a long time. So But it would be very hard for me to just recite exactly how the formula works. There are a series of thresholds and measures that are taken at different thresholds. Yeah. Yes, sir. We certainly could do that. In particular, if we get to a final rule and actually adopt, when we're at that point, it would be a done deal. There would be no more changes made, and we'd be happy to present that to the commission, I think.
I was just going to suggest that probably around the time of the work meeting or perhaps the interim meeting for next year, because I believe we're targeting it for implementation in January of 2024. So by that time, we will have worked through all of the public comments and devised what the final approach will be, and then you'll have what will be implemented before it's implemented.
Right. Sure. And it's worthwhile at some point, perhaps, if you're interested, to compare what was proposed and what is adopted. And we'd be in a very good position to do that in the autumn. In the meantime, we'd be happy to get you something that would give you an idea where the proposal is now. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much, Kurt. I don't see, Bob.
So, is that coming through for everybody, or should I turn that off? Okay, so, on this issue, the public comment for this is, I think, February 7th, next month, and it's a fairly creative tool that the Empress City Council has developed based on the variance also an index. And that index right now is rated low for halibut. And then there's a index from the IPHC, surveying the variance, which goes high, medium, low, very low. And right now, those numbers would be low and low, which reduce the current count from 1,706 metric tons to 1,034. And then there's varying degrees, it's high, medium, and out. There's different fluctuations in days between that low and the current status.
And if I may offer, that was one of the more complex things that the council had to work through, was how do you index the abundance of, in particular, small halibut in the Bering Sea. We have a trawl survey, we have a set line survey, which is the better of the two. Ultimately, they decided on a combination of both. But that was a fundamental issue that took a lot of work. Just how do you index that abundance? And then what are the triggers as a result of those?
All right, thanks very much, Kurt.
And in your question about the unguided fishing,
Yes.
we're happy to, okay. You guys, turn it over to Brianna Bowman.
Okay, thanks.
She's Alaska Department of Fish and Game.
Hi. My name is Brianna Bowman. I'm with Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And we were wondering about the unguided fishing sector. Was there anything specifically, or?
Well, maybe just refresh my memory. My recollection, it was done through a survey.
Yes. So how we estimate harvest in the unguided fishing sector for Alaska is through our statewide harvest survey. And this is a survey that we mail out to those that have purchased a fishing license in Alaska, either resident or non-resident. And we send out about roughly 47,000 surveys annually. And the response rate for that has been roughly between 30 to 40%, kind of varying between years. And we send those out through batches throughout the year. And then the finalized data, so if we, for example, send out batches through 2021 and also in the beginning of 2022 to estimate the harvest of 2021, those final numbers are usually available around September each year.
Right, so you basically would have an estimate a year later from the fishery, roughly?
Yeah, it takes a few months to get those final surveys in. We do a lot of data cleaning and data querying to make sure that we have the best possible data, so that we have a good, that we're confident in the numbers that we're presenting and can establish good confidence intervals around our data as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you notice much change from year to year? Is there any trend?
In terms of harvest or in terms of response rate? In terms of harvest, I believe it's been, for the last few years, has been relatively stable with the exception of 2020. 2020 has been an exceptional year for a lot of things, but overall it's been relatively stable, so we haven't seen much change in the unguided harvest.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else in the, no? Okay. So then the next item, we're back to finance and administration.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to everybody, and do apologize for the setup, but we did have to squeeze into one of the side rooms for this session. So we are now going to hear the presentation of the Finance and Administration Committee meeting report. So if I could just have the team put that report up on screen, please. And just scroll all the way to the last appendices with the recommendations. Okay, well, thank you very much. Noting that the 99th session of the Finance and Administration Committee was held Monday morning, the report has been adopted via correspondence by the Commission, and noting that the FAC consists of all 6 commissioners, I'm going to cut to the chase and just walk us through the recommendations, and if there is a need for any additional discussion, we can certainly open that up and hold that discussion and provide any additional responses. So the first recommendation that arose from the 99th session was related to the financial statement for FY 2022. And this is where the Finance and Administration Committee has recommended that the Commission note the financial statement for FY 2022 as detailed in paper 04. And this recommendation and paper relate directly to the next recommendation, which I'll read as in tandem. And that's the Annual Independent Auditors Report for 2022. The FAC has recommended that the Commission accept the Independent External Auditors Report for FY 2022 in accordance with Regulation 14 of the Financial Regulations, and that regulation requires that the Commission accept the report by consensus. And so I'm going to pause there, Chair, and see if the Commission would like to first of all take on that first recommendation to note the financial statement, but then also to accept the independent external auditor's report by consensus. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thanks, Dave. I think we've been over this, but just to confirm, I think there's consensus around this, both items. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. The next relates to the 2023 budget update, and there are a number of reasons of why we have gone through updating the FY 2023 budget in year, including a number of changes to the income lines, but then also more importantly related to the Fishery Independent Setline Survey design that was adopted at the interim meeting and therefore required an update. And so, Chair, thus the FAC has recommended that the Commission adopt the amended FY 2023 budget as shown on the screen, and I won't walk through those details. So I'll pause again, Chair.
Yeah, we're all in agreement with that.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the budget estimates for FY 2024, there was substantial discussion around the proposed increase coming from the Secretariat to cater and ensure that all current FTEs are fully funded. In doing so, the FAC has recommended that the Commission agree for the two contracting parties to engage in intersessional discussions over the coming months to adopt a budget for FY 2024 and the associated contributions. And this is a similar process to what the Commission has followed for the last number of years, where there has been additional discussion for the upcoming budget intersessionally, and then the Commission has convened a special session to review and finally adopt a budget for the subsequent year. And so I'll pause again, Chair.
Yes, that's the agreement that we reached the other day. And I guess maybe the issue around scheduling, I don't know if we need to do that now, but I'd say we need to do it before we conclude this meeting.
Last year it was March or something like that.
That's my recollection, John, yes.
And to add to that, Chair and Vice Chair, I'd suggest maybe a little bit more time this year, because it certainly sounds like there's going to be a lot more details that will be required to be pulled out and provided. And so whether it's late March or early April, it still fits within our fiscal year components, because we don't invoice for those contributions until the 1st of October. And so if, depending on everybody else's arrangements, and as you say, maybe that's some additional planning discussion, but we'd certainly appreciate just a little bit more time to prepare whatever you may require.
Well, how about maybe two things, and we don't have to finalize dates right now, people can think about it, but maybe the first thing is if there's questions that we need to put to the Secretary about any items, that we set a date for that, and let's suggest mid-March. And then if we're going to have a special session, then let's say no later than mid-April.
Sounds good.
Does that work, Dave?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chair. Regarding the IPHC rules of procedure, so there's a number of amendments that have been provided, mainly around procedural components for informational sessions and special sessions and the submission of papers, as well as the MSAB and the Processor Advisory Board is currently reviewing some amendments to their rules of procedure. And so the FAC has recommended that the Commission adopt the rules of procedure while taking into consideration any additional discussion at this current meeting throughout the week. And the normal process is to hear the Processor Advisory Board or the Conference Board reports if they are considering amendments, and then to look to adopt the rules of procedure on Friday. And I think that's consistent with this paragraph. I'll pause again, Chair.
Yeah, I was just musing then, do we need this in right now in case we want to change anything in rules of procedure? But this would not be inconsistent if something comes forward, but I guess, do we need it? Or, yeah, no. I'm thinking out loud. Let's just leave it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And then there was one final recommendation before a couple of requests, and the recommendation is that the Commission agree for the two contracting parties to engage intersessionally to conduct a review of the budget and appropriations, noting the previous paragraphs that you're going to meet intersessionally to make a decision on adopting an FY 2024 budget.
Yes, that's all consistent. John?
Yeah, just noted, I can envision a circumstance where maybe we don't complete that to our mutual satisfaction in time for the FY24 discussion, but take it as far as we can, and maybe there are additional topics that we want to have further conversations on further out. It's possible.
Great, thank you very much. And then associated with those recommendations are just two requests relating to the budget estimates, and it's simply requesting that the Commission note the proposed FY 2024 budget as well as the proposed contributions. And so it's just simply noting in the Commission report those two paragraphs. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so that's adopted. Good. That's our business for this afternoon. So we're concluded here.
Damn, you're good.
Thanks to anybody who's listening online. We have concluded the meeting for today. Thank you.